Let's answer the most frequent medical device questions that I get. I compiled all the questions I get from LinkedIn, from phone calls, from the different forums I have done, and I'm gonna put them to a random question generator and I will answer each one. These are questions I hear all the time. They're really common, and hopefully today's answers are gonna give you a really good insight on the medical device, how to break in, how to be successful, and how to prepare. So let's begin to the random question generator with all the questions that I compiled. What is the number one quality to be a successful med device rep? Wow, I think for that one, it's simple, but just showing up. That's going to set you apart. The accountability and showing up. You're there for cases on time, you're there early, you have all the materials you need, and you're ready to go. I think that trait itself gets you about 90% of the way there. And to really separate from other reps, there's a few other things. But the biggest thing is saying that you're going to do what you're going to do, which is show up and be prepared. Next question. How do you avoid application and interview burnout? What are some negotiation tips during that time? And how do you assess your own worth for salary expectations? So that's a three-part question, and let's break it down. So to avoid application and interview burnout, it's a really tough process, especially if you're graduating college, you're entering a tough market and you're applying to so many jobs and it's kind of a crapshoot, you're taking a shotgun approach. What I would do is remain excited for the jobs that you are getting interviews for and really prepare for those, because those are the most likely to result in an offer. And when I applied, I did apply to a lot of jobs, and it was tough because partly it felt like I was getting ghosted and no one was reading my application, nor was there a response of, hey, we've got your application, this is what we were looking for in a candidate, so I would know what to do to improve. So I understand that it's a tough process and I empathize with you. And the biggest thing would be to really focus your energy on the interviews that you do have and networking for jobs that you really want. So, time is a limited resource. You can't network with anyone. I think networking is really important. But if there was 5 jobs I really wanted out of 25, for those 5, I would do everything I can to prepare and interview, along with network with people on the team so that I have a foot in. Second, negotiation tips. And I think that's a little bit tied to how do you assess your own worth for salary. The easiest way is to get data points in the market. You could go online and search or just talk to people and kind of get an expectation of what people are earning. If an undergraduate entering a medical device role, you talk to a few clinical specialists or sales reps and their salary is anywhere from 125 to 150, that's probably where I'm targeting, right? I'm not going to ask more because the fair market's saying, yeah, 125 for entry-level roles. And for the negotiation tips, if someone comes in and offers me 80 when I know the other people are making 125, it's tough because you want to take the job offer and start running with it and do well. But you also want to make sure you get your fair worth, because it's going to set you up for this year and the future when you get promotions, especially when you get a 5% promotion on 80,000, that's about 4,000, but on 125, that's about 6,000. Not a big difference, but that extra 2,000 could help. So what I would do is collect data points of what people are making and ask us, what does it look like for the person making 125 in this role? And they say, oh, we're looking for this experience and this education. And then you could state confidently, well, on my resume, I talked about how I graduated with this degree, which sounds like that's something you're looking for. And I also wanted to share a couple of experiences that sound like what you're looking for. And usually that takes care of kind of the negotiation for your first role. Next question. How did you prepare your career during undergraduate? We get a little visit from my dog. That's a really good question. I think the most important thing is to enjoy your 4 years and do well in the classroom. You don't need to be a 4.0 student, but put up good marks, and that's going to set you up for many opportunities. I don't think it's going to get you an opportunity, but it's not going to limit you from good opportunities if you get some good grades, right? And I think it's to have a whole holistic experience. I played intramural sports, I worked in the hospital, I researched on the bench, and I had a really fun time. I met some really great friends who are still my friends today. So don't go burn yourself out working 20 hours a day to do well, 4.0 in class, and volunteer and save the world. I think it's important to have a really holistic experience, because one part of college I don't think is really stated is you emotionally developing as a person and how you interact with people. That's extremely important. So how I prepared for post college, there was not active preparation. I did know that I wanted to have a well-rounded resume. So I wanted to do well in school. I wanted to have clinical research or be in the hospital, and I wanted academic research because that was actually a field that I was vetting. I don't think it was for me, but with those few things, I could create a really compelling story when I went to go interview for roles. And my belief is to share stories in threes. I would look at your resume and experience and come up with 3 things that you could share about why that role was great for you. And it could really be anything. I think sales is storytelling. So that's your first challenge, is selling your story and sharing it. Next question. Let's see what the random question generator pops up. What do you think is the future trajectory of the medical device industry? Wow, that's a really high level question. I think it's a very resilient field that's going to be here for a very long time with the aging population. I know there's some really novel drugs that are, saying they're cure all for all. I don't think that's the case. I don't think there's a proven medication. I know GLP-1s had a really exciting thing around reducing maybe diabetic or cardiovascular events because of the weight loss. But for me, the future of the medical device industry is very strong. There's a ton of innovation, especially in the cardiovascular and neuro space, treating unmet needs. Seeing that in the innovation, I know there's going to be future potential for these jobs. What else excites me is I entered as a clinical specialist and then a sales rep. I could have stayed in those roles and had a really fulfilling career until I retired, but I wanted a little bit more in my career, and med device as an industry offered a lot of opportunities, be if you want to go international, in-house, or take it to different products. So the med device industry is resilient, just like healthcare. It's a really great sector to be in. Next question, let's see what we get. Next question is, oh, the random number generator is pausing. How do I stand out if I don't have as much experience? I think everyone has a story to share, right? With that being said, some people are going to have a lot of amazing experiences and maybe cured cancer, and some people are going to have a little bit more limited experience and not have cured cancer. With that being said, how do you share your story? On LinkedIn, you always see these BS posts about how you could really embellish something. But, for example, let's say, you did well in school and studied psychobio, and you also worked, maybe at like the athletic department, hosting. So I would talk about your degree and say, I learned a very clinical and technical degree. I performed well. My grade point average was 3.4. In studying, I learned how to write, research grants or proposals that my, principal investigator would review. I also worked how to collaborate with the team. I did well in school, and that taught me how to prepare and execute. I also wanted to share about my time volunteering or working at the athletic department where I was, equipment manager. And in that role, I traveled with a team. I dedicated 20 hours a week. I had to be prepared. And there was a lot of stuff behind the scenes that people don't see. So I was in charge of, X, Y, Z. And in that role, I learned how to communicate to many different stakeholders. I learned how to talk to the team, the other equipment managers, the coaches, and prepare and execute on my assigned task, which I did really well. And then think of a third thing. I think everyone has a story to share. I like things in 3. I think psychologically it makes sense to share in 3s. And there's always something that you could find to share. Don't let your experience limit you. If you don't have a really robust experience, share about your potential and what you are going to do, your eagerness to learn. Show up to that interview, and if you're interviewing for a pacemaker role, go into that interview as a novice, but say, this is what I did to prepare for this interview. I went onto the different company sites and I learned so much about pacing, the surgery, the disease state, that I have the potential to do really well in this role. So don't judge me on my past achievements. Judge me in this interview and how I prepared for it. That's how I would accomplish and tackle that question. Next question. Let's see what pops up for the next one. What are some red flags you look for when deciding who is not a good fit for hiring? That is, every hiring manager is going to have a different take on this. My big thing is if I shouldn't be drinking in an interview, but if you and I could sit together and have a beer and talk and enjoy each other's company, that is a green flag. Also, just treating people well. If we meet for lunch or go for an interview and you open the door for a lady coming out, that's a good sign, right? If you cut someone off or are rude to the server, that is worrying me, right? If I could sit down and have lunch for you, or if you went to lunch with my partner or friend and they said, yeah, this person is really cool, that's a really good testament. I think coming with really good questions, everyone talks about in the interview having really good questions. But if you were being really aggressive on pricing in the initial, or sorry, your salary on the initial kind of conversations, I would be concerned, because it starts with, team culture, our products, serving patients, serving doctors. Salary plays a really important role. And that's something that should be outlined in the beginning. This role we're typically hiring in the range of 180 to 220. Dive into the interviews about that, and then come back to price of where we need to be. It's important to talk about price early to make sure we're on the same page. But if you gave off the feeling that you only cared about salary and money, then maybe you're not the right fit for my team. There's some hiring managers that like that. They know their sales reps are motivated by money, and they're going to go out there and hustle and hit that commission. Next question. Should I apply for internships or jobs after graduation? Is it best to contact individuals within the company or apply using the careers page? So the latter part of the question, I always recommend applying through the company's website. I think it's the cleanest, and there's no third party. I think some third parties are great, like LinkedIn, but sometimes you get onto these third parties where they collect the resume and submit it for you. And then in regard to contacting individuals for the company, I think you always need to get a referral from the inside to get your foot in the door for these jobs. But you need to do it in a strategic way. I made a video about that, how to network, but really approach these people, try to add value to them and not waste their time. Say, I'm looking at this job at Medtronic. I researched that it's one of the top cardiac devices. I spent 10, 15 minutes looking about pacemakers. I was just curious to learn about your experience and what you would recommend to set someone applying apart, right? That's really important. And should you apply for internships or jobs after graduating? We're all on our own path, so whatever is best for you. I think going straight to a job and making money and getting that benefits would be obviously the clear choice. But if there was an amazing internship that set you up for a really amazing role in a few years, I would go for that. Or if you're having trouble for a job after 12 months of applying, maybe the internship will set you up for that first W-2. So that's how I would approach that. Let's see what the next question is. What past experiences are hiring managers looking for in a full-time position? We talked about selling your story in threes, but sometimes hiring managers don't care about what you did in the past. It's what you're going to do for them now and in the future. So if you come into the interview showing your potential and your ability to learn, especially for the clinical specialist roles, and how you're going to excel in that territory, that's going to be really important. If you show that typically it takes 18 months for people to get trained, but you have the ability to get trained in 12 months because you're dedicated, and that you're going to go service that territory and support your sales reps who have them hit President's Club, that's all really good. I think hiring managers are looking for experience in building blocks, but the biggest thing is, that personality, that tenacity, and the eagerness to learn. Next question. Let's see what this one is as it generates. It's spitting it out. It looks like it might be a longer question. Oh, it's short. How can you get noticed by recruiters, and how do you keep their attention? Recruiters come in twofold. There's some that work for the companies and their talent acquisition, and they're building a pipeline for future talent. And there's also third-party recruiters that will contract with companies. Recruiters are hired or employed to bring in great talent for a specific role and then move on. And usually they're compensated for each person they place. I mean, each person that they interview and get placed with a company, they're going to receive a commission. For the people not assigned to a company, you could develop a relationship with them, but just know that their interest is to get people placed. So if you're a clinical specialist or trying to break in, it's going to be really tough to have that relationship with the recruiter. You could have a great interview, be professional, follow up every 2 months to see if any new roles are open that you would fit. But imagine if you're one of the top R&D engineers or a top CEO that is in demand. The recruiters are going to be after you because those roles are typically very high salary, and they know that if you're a good person at that level, if you execute at the CEO level or R&D, that you're going to get placed easily. So they're going to keep you in kind of the inner circle looking for jobs. But for those entry-level roles, you just need to follow up and maintain their attention. Sometimes good recruiters will follow up and tell you how to improve and what needs to be worked or what the company's looking for. Sometimes recruiters are so busy and they're focused on the next job that they won't tell you. They'll have a great conversation with you and then move on and not tell you, hey, actually they were looking for someone with 5 years of experience, sorry. But really good recruiters would follow up. And then recruiters at the companies, I think those people are great to establish a relationship. Hopefully they could get you into the company, but what's really important is those people could play a role as you look at your next role in 3 to 5 years internally. Same thing as always. Let's see what the next question is. I'm really excited that people have such good questions. All these questions are fantastic. So whoever's asking them, fantastic job. Is B2B, business to business experience needed for med device, and is that the best route? A lot of people breaking into med device do have B2B sales, and that could be at ADP where you're selling HR software or payroll software. I think it's really important because that teaches you how to be accountable to a AOP or plan number. You might be assigned $1 million of revenue for the year, and your goal is to exceed that. So if you have successful B2B experience where you're showing and have documented success, that's going to be really important. That's one way to get in. I had an interview with a buddy, Travis, who sold copiers. I know it's kind of funny, but he did really well and broke into med device because it was a more fulfilling role working with physicians and impacting patients. Is B2B the only experience and only way to get in? No. D1, D2, D3 athletes are breaking in, B2B experience, biomedical engineers, anyone that wants to break into med device can. Yes, there are more probable ways, but if you show your resilience and tenacity, you can find a way in. I do think B2B sales is, a common way, and it's a way to get a quicker, get into the industry faster after college and do well. Let's see what the next question is. What was the process like getting into med device, and do you have any helpful tips? So I did not know about this field, so if you're watching this video, that's the first amazing thing you're doing is learning about this amazing field. Then it'll be selecting companies or devices that intrigue you. I really like cardiology. It uses electrical signals to send heartbeats, similar to what I studied in college, which was neuroscience, which the brain uses electrical and chemical. So that intrigued me, so I went all in on cardiac devices. The process to get in med device, you need to network, you need to get your foot in the door with an interview, get in with HR. They'll do a quick character assessment, just trying to get you on the phone and vetting you as a normal person. If you have the resume and pass that screening call, they would bump you to the hiring manager. And companies all do it differently, but typically you'll meet the hiring manager, who then will push you to the field for technical interviews, and then back to the hiring manager for a final interview. It's a long process, but the big thing is that these companies are amazing. They move really slow. So be prepared and professional for every single encounter. If you meet the hiring manager, you're dressed in suit, dressed in dress, execute well, and then they might say, oh, I want you to meet one of the clinical specialists. They just graduated 2 years from UCLA. You'll really like them. And you go meet them in a very casual setting and are not professional. All that information gets fed back to the hiring manager. So whatever you want to represent to the hiring manager, just know everyone's talking to the hiring manager. But typically, if you're just breaking into med device, it could be a 4 to 8 week process. When jobs are posted, they're hiring now. They're not going to post a job for the future. So if you're undergrad with 6 months to go, there's not going to be jobs for you to apply. There might be externships or internships, but med device field roles are posted on an as-need basis, and typically it slows down around the holidays and then reopens in January, which is the close of the business year, coinciding with holidays, which is typically slower for everyone, and then the start of the new business year. Let's do a couple more questions on today's kind of new episode format of answering your guys' questions. What undergraduate experiences have shaped your career decision? My work in the ER with stroke patients was really formidable. I liked the healthcare and the business side, and I also liked with physicians that are delivering life-saving care. Patients with stroke would have symptoms such as aphasia, ability not to speak or move, and the doctors were able to do pharmaceutical or interventional treatment to resolve those symptoms so those patients could have the best chance of returning to a normal life. Stroke is devastating, so that was really impactful. I also worked on a research bench, absolutely loved my job. I think it's imperative for research to be fully funded and occur, but we used animal models, which I did not necessarily like working on. I didn't like the sacrifice of animals for research, and it was a little bit of a solitary experience being on the bench by yourself. Going to conferences was amazing and sharing your research and meeting peers, but I felt that maybe that wasn't for me. And then I always had an entrepreneurial experience, but I guess there's nothing to show for it. But I did enjoy business, sales, and kind of that higher business side where I did pursue an MBA for business studies. So those three things shaped my decision to go into med device sales and really not decide PhD programs or MD programs. I always thought I would go work for a few years and come back to something. That did not happen. I loved my job and stuck with it until the very end. Let's go with the last question for today's episode. How much training will be provided? How much is one expected to know in advance? That is a great question. Really good question. All the companies, while you're getting paid on the W-2 with benefits, are going to send you to training. Typically, the first training is just HR, company policies, company culture, and then you would do in-person trainings, be it for a few days, a week, or even 2 weeks on the product, depending on how technical it is. You need to go in and do really well, but for you to be successful in this job, they're going to train you clinically all the way to the end, plus learning about sales skills, especially for the territory sales roles. There is dedicated sales training, but typically those people come in with a track record of success and have the sales toolbox. What I'm seeing now, I came in with minimal experience, but I had a really strong background in science and communicating to physicians and patients. But now, for example, for pacing, part of the interview is a technical interview where a lot of research and training in your preparation for this interview is understanding EKGs, pacemaker, and basic functions, so you could shine in the interview. I see people going to prep programs, getting placed at these big med device programs. They go to a prep program for 3, 6, 9 months to learn about the clinical cardiology, devices, etc. And they're placing because they have that knowledge. I think what's important is you're going to get trained on the job. You need to know some things to pass and shine in the interview and show your ability to learn, comprehend these conceptual topics, and to execute. I don't think you need to go to a training school. I think it makes it easier, but it costs money and time. If you can study on your own, dedicate the time, I think you can do really well. So that's today's episode. Thank you so much for watching all these top questions I received from everywhere, LinkedIn, forums, phone calls. These are really common questions. I appreciate you listening. Stay tuned for more episodes, more, I don't know what you call this, mailbag questions, and I appreciate everyone for hopping on. Take care. Med Device Matt.